Shalom Aleichem, Erev Tov. I think I'm in the middle. I think so. No, the Zoom camera doesn't matter. It's Yitzchak's camera that matters. Yeah? Yeah. We are gathered together for the first time in a long time. And I wanted to jumpstart our study of Shulchan Aruch, but of course we'll take a little tangent just before that. Because tonight is the Azkarah of a very famous Chacham. That if Rabbi Yosef Zarnigan was here, I would ask him to introduce him. But he's not here. So I'm going to ask you if you have ever heard of Rabbi Gershom Mendes Seixas. I think I'm saying his last name correctly. Seixas. No. Well, now it's time to shed some light on the Chacham that maybe not everybody has heard him before. And I'll dedicate tonight's Shiur and Shulchan Aruch in his honor. So I'm not going to take a whole tangent on him, just a brief tangent. If you look in the Google Classroom, I sent out a link to an English article written about him, I think by Agudas Yisrael. I was surprised that they wrote something about him, though it makes sense that it was printed in 1977, because likely since 1977 they never said his name again. And then I also posted a Hebrew PDF from a website that I suggest that you get a subscription to. It's free. It's called HaChacham HaYomi, the Daily Chacham. And they have a much more advanced Hebrew website than English website. But even their English website, if you subscribe, they'll send you every day an email of the Chachamim whose Azkarot are today. And they will tell you little snippets from their Torah, like little teachings that are relevant. Huh? Oh, very good. Very good. So Chacham Gershom Mendes Seixas was born in 1745 to his father Yitzchak in Newport, Rhode Island. So for the sake of our conversation, he was the first Sephardic, they say Orthodox, I'm going to say Sephardic, clergy member who served this country's Jewish population, who was born in this country. Okay, so that makes him significant. He passed away in 1816 on the 6th of Tammuz. I see some encyclopedias say the 7th of Tammuz, but from what all the sources that I have say the 6th of Tammuz, which is tonight. They're very particular not to call him rabbi, because he wasn't actually ordained rabbi. Those of you who are familiar with this country at that time didn't yet have any yeshivot in play that were ordaining rabbis. So he sadly only learned Torah from his father, who was a Talmid Chacham, and he himself was a Talmid Chacham. And they want to know, how much of a Talmid Chacham was he? He established the first Bet Adin in New York, at least for Sephardim. One of the members of the Bet Adin was Ashkenazi, of course, like all Sephardic Bet Adin. He just gathered the three Chachamim he knew. The other Sephardic one was the name Chacham Pinto. There was a Pinto that was connected then to the old community there. The same Pintos, perhaps, that are from Amsterdam. The same connection, they also connected to the ones in Morocco. They're all the same Shoshelet in some direction. He opened up, he was a Shochet, he was a Mohel. He was the only Mohel, not in New York. He was the only Mohel in the entire northeast of the United States of America. So he traveled extensively. Tremendous amounts. So one time he traveled, in his diaries we find, he traveled for 34 days to do 4 beritot, and all the way to Montreal, different places that he went, and this is before there were ways to get around. And the amount that he charged wasn't enough. Even he charged 34 pence, and it cost him 32 pence to make the trip. So I'm glad to know all Sephardic rabbis are good at making money off of people. And this was part of his tour that he did. In general, he was sought after. We have a few Piskei Din from his Bedin that are left over. One of them famously is a question about whether a Kohen has to receive the first Aliyah. There were some communities that were trying to push the Kohanim out. There was another one about, I just reviewed today. I don't remember. A few other Piskei Halacha we know from him. He was from the founders of the famous Yeshuot Yisrael Beit Knesset in Newport, Rhode Island. He was raised to be a chazan primarily, and they always refer to him as minister, because a rabbi he wasn't. We call him chacham. But in general, I say you could call him a rabbi also. In general, what is a rabbi? A rabbi who is ordained, how many people that are ordained don't know any Torah? and there are people that know much Torah that are not ordained. So which one do you prefer? It's a silly thing that what is your credential? The credential doesn't mean anything anymore. It's like what I told you on Shabbat. For those of you who weren't here on Shabbat, it's important. My brother Ronen's mother-in-law, Dr. Bella Haas-Weinberg, shared with my wife a joke. Said there was a rabbi once came to interview. A new American rabbi came to interview for a synagogue. They started interviewing. One of the questions they asked him was, Rabbi, what is next week's parasha? He said, I thought you were hiring a rabbi, not a prophet. He didn't have any clue what is next week's parasha, and that's the status of Chachamim that were around in these generations. He ended up marrying an Ashkenazi woman from the Kohen family, and her name was Elkala. Elka, I guess, was the name, but they always referred to her as Elkala. That's how they write her name and all. She died, and then later he marries a second wife. He has, I believe, 3 children from his first wife, or 4 children, and then 9 children from his second wife. And those are obviously children who survived. He's a famous... so one of his sons, David Seixas, founded the Deaf Mute Foundation in Philadelphia. He was one of his descendants that I saw was killed in the line of duty in the American military in World War II. And there are definitely Seixas families that are still alive and well and connected. Maybe a little bit of zooming out of his life, he became the minister of the Sharith Israel in New York. That was where he was the rabbi. At a certain point in time, he had to run away from the British. He was part of the supporters of the American Revolution. Like many of the Sephardic Jews there, some of you might know, who funded the American Revolution, he was very vocal in his support of the American Revolution. We have tefillot that he wrote in support of the soldiers, and so much so that he preferred to leave the Beit HaKnesset, Sharith Israel, because he refused to be a rabbi under British occupation when they came to New York. And so he knew that New York was going to fall. And his last sermon that he taught there was, this may be the last time we ever meet in the synagogue. He packed up the Sifrei Torah and all the holy books, and then he ran away to his father-in-law's house. Married to his father was Ashkenazi. I want to tell you maybe Scranton, Pennsylvania. I want to tell you, but don't hold me to that exact place. From there, yes, Ochana?
When I was writing my book, remember, his name would come up if you search up.
Elchanan has been writing a book on American pioneers, American Jewish pioneers in the revolutionary era in this country. Baruch Hashem, he's been collecting names and Batei Knesset and people. There is... So you want to sit at the table? I can make room. You sure? Okay. Because he ran away, he ends up finding himself being the rabbi of Mikveh Israel congregation in Philadelphia, where Rabbi Yosef Zernegan is the Chacham today. And that became a big part of the identity of that community, was the legacy of Rabbi Gershom Mendes Seixas. When George Washington was elected president of the United States of America, Rabbi Seixas was one of the 9 clergy members that was there to bless him, and he was one of the 3 who were Jewish. I'm not mistaken in my numbers. He was present at the inauguration of President George Washington. He was very close with all of the different political factions that were involved in setting up this country. Was a very well-known Chacham. He sat on the board of many, many institutions. Columbia University, the oldest part of Columbia University is Columbia College, and he was one of the founding members there, sat on the board of Columbia College. He was involved in setting up many, many institutions. And if you go to his Wikipedia page, you look up Rabbi Gershom Mendes Seixas, you look him up, you'll see all of the different accomplishments, too many for me to list right now. He was very famous for being invited to many churches to speak, to teach Torah in many different churches. That he has a piece in one of his sermons in which he says that now is the time that those people who are willing to learn Torah and get close to the Torah, it's time to rethink our preconceived notions about them and be willing to speak with them. Nonetheless, he refused any formal debates. And it always perplexed people why he'd be willing to teach Christians and talk with Christians, but never debate them. Those of you who were in my class 3 summers ago, in the writings of Chacham Faur, you remember Rabbi Yehuda Bibas. Baruch, you're still reading the book of the Scottish missionaries, right? So do you remember the Scottish missionaries, when they came to meet Rabbi Yehuda Bibas, they were very bothered by the fact that he would talk to them all the time except for He would never debate with them about religion. Why? Give me a good Sephardic answer. There's no need to. We're an autonomous Jewish nation in exile. We have never had any religious enemies. We have no desire to convince other religions that they are wrong. You could do your thing. Don't convince me. I'm not going to convince you. As long as you're not my enemy politically, I don't care. And so Rabbi Mendes Seixas probably had the same overall attitude. What's very interesting to note is I think he appreciated American freedom so much because his family were survivors. They were Anusim who came from Portugal and who they themselves on their flesh felt what it would be like if there was a country that wouldn't have freedom of religion. In fact,
He was invited to the first Thanksgiving party.
he was the first Thanksgiving party.
He spoke about the discourse of faith.
If I'm not mistaken, I have the prayers that he wrote for Thanksgiving that should be said every Thanksgiving.
He said that the religious freedoms that are found in the United States should be a unifying factor amongst all religions.
If I'm not mistaken, in Philadelphia, there was a push in the early years to ask religious questions to politicians as to make sure whether they could be fit for politics. And he was very against it. He felt that this country, and part of this was incredible for him. He felt that the fact that there was a country that for the first time in history could put aside all the religions and the colors and the races and to start a country together was a chidush and kedugmato. Thought it was an incredible thing. And if you see many of the chachamim who lived in that generation, they had pretty incredible things to say. In the dictionary, this encyclopedia that I have, I once wandered upon a Jewish bookstore, and I grabbed this book off the shelf, and I've made use of it every once in a while. It's called Sefer Artzot HaChaim, Shem HaGdolim L'Gdolei Yisrael B'Amerika. Shem HaGdolim is a book written by the Chida, which is an encyclopedia of all kinds of chachamim who lived in his generation, generations before him. This rabbi tried to continue the American version of it, the rabbis who lived here. Interestingly enough, he has a few entries on Sephardic chachamim. He's a rabbi from Borough Park, I'm assuming, Rabbanit. I don't know where Taylor Street is. Brooklyn, 11211.
No,
Williamsburg, even better. You could. I think he's Hasidish. His name is Rav Dov Ber Schwartz. Yeah? Something here. And I'm very impressed. Okay, so I can't tell you.
Sounds like a Sephardic name.
Mamash, you see? Not so long ago. Tafshin Nun Bet, that's 1992, I think. Not so long ago. He might still be alive. In any case, he writes a lot of things about, many Ashkenazi rabbis, a very specific part of history, but he has here an entry on Rabbi Gershom Mendes Seixas, and he writes, Rav Gadol B'Torah. He was a big rabbi in the Torah. Rav Chazan Dekal Sharit Israel in New York. He was the rabbi in the Chazan of Sharit Israel in New York. Ve'amad b'mishmarto meshach 50 shana, and he served as a rabbi for 50 years. He also enters here a sentence that I didn't see in any other book, so I'm not clear that it's accurate. He said, and under his jurisdiction, he threw out all the members of the community who ate not kosher and didn't keep Shabbat. I'd find it very hard to believe. Likely in America of those days, if you threw out all the members who were like that, you would be left with just yourself in the Beit HaKnesset. But it's nice. I mean, they're trying to say was, don't think that he was some Sephardic rabbi in Sharit Israel. He was a real deal. He was one of us. And then he says in those days he was invited to George Washington. They knew about this part here. He started a famous organization, a Chavah Kedisha called Chesed Ve'emet in New York. And then he passed away at the age of 71. And then they put here his matzeva, his tombstone, which I think is pretty impressive that in some of these books. Where is he buried? I'm assuming New York, but it could be also Philadelphia. I can't tell you. Every time I go to Mikveh Israel, I want to go to the cemetery to see the graves of the rabbis there. And every time I tell Rabbi Yosef, it's either Shabbat or a Brit Milah where Rabbi Yosef can't take me, or someone has to show me what's going on there. Not for the sake of praying there. I want to see who are the different people that are there. It's very important. Chaim Solomon, right across, Mamash is there. It's not far from there.
I remember walking by and all of a sudden I hear this tour bus like, here, and inside there is the grave of
The famous Chaim Solomon, the founder of the American Revolution, is buried there. And the Jewish man who funded George Washington's endeavors. So, but there's something very interesting you also see in the writings of Chachamim in this time. It wasn't a real movement, but there was for a half a minute, there was a havamina, like a consideration to possibly make George Washington the king. Everybody came from a world where there were kings. And it was something incredible that George Washington rejected them. He said, this is not why we're fighting this war. I mean, if anybody was going to be the king, it should have been George Washington. He said, it's not the reason. If you see the letters between the famous general in the American military and George Washington, they exchanged letters. It's not what we're fighting for. We're trying to do something completely different. I think every time I think about this country, I think two things you have to know about this country is one, this is the greatest social experiment that's ever been pulled on. This United States of America, our Chachamim who viewed these laws and saw this country and were grateful for it, saw such incredible things here. I think we also realize that such a great social experiment can fail. And if it fails, it will be the greatest social experiment that have ever failed in the world. And it's something you have to think very deeply about. It's not simple. Don't take it for granted. What we have here doesn't exist anywhere in the world. And yeah, I'm sure there are people that have imitated and that have tried and have replicated. Sometimes you wonder about other English-speaking countries. They're nowhere near like what we have here. It just takes one visit with me to London, and you realize you're living in an English-speaking country, but it's not the same as this country. Sometimes even you leave California for Texas or Arizona, you realize it could be so different in one country to one state to another state. This is something very special, and as long as we're here, it's important for us to recognize that we're grateful. We have Hakkat Tov, and the Chachamim that were here at the beginning of these days, and they spoke about freedom, and they spoke about revolutions. Rabbi Gershom Mendes Seixas, he hated war. Mamash hated war. But he believed the cause that the Americans were fighting for was justified. And you see the rabbis of the Spanish Portuguese communities speaking out against slavery, speaking on very hot topics, by the way, that not all their communities agreed with them about. So Rabbi Gershom Mendes Seixas, when he closed down Sheretz Israel and ran away with the Sifrei Torah, half the membership didn't agree. They were happy the British were coming. But he said that's not the point. The point is that we need freedom in this country. And he ran away until he was able to come back and serve the community again in freedom. Alav Shalom. It's something in your mind. Whenever you study Torah, whenever you sit down, think, who are the Chachamim that let us live until today? Their names sometimes are forgotten. And it's our job to uncover the dust from their eyes. And I'm going to segue straight into Shulchan Aruch. I'm not going to make this a separate section, though there probably should be a separate clip just about Rabbi Gershom Mendes Seixas. It's important for me that it's not separate, because the part of Shulchan Aruch we're dealing with right now is the part that has to do with appointing a chazan for the community. So if you want to open your books with me, for those who don't have, in the Google Classroom I posted you want a hard copy? I have two right here. I have two extra copies over here, next to the green Tanakh. Yeah. I'm on page 107 here. Let's review Maran. It's Siman Nun Gimel 53, Seif Yutet. Seif Yutet, Maran writes, we mentioned about Gerim already last time. Maran writes, Afilu Yachid, Yachol Le'akev V'lomar, Eni Rotzeh Sheploni Yeh Chazan. Even one person in the community can say, I don't want so-and-so to be the Chazan today. Unless they already agreed on him before, or he agreed on it before. Rama adds, "V'dafka shi'eh le'oto yachid tam hagun al pi tuvei ha'ir." What does it mean that an individual can hold back the appointment of a chazan? Only if he has a good reason. Who decides what's a good reason? The tuvei ha'ir. Who are the tuvei ha'ir?
Board members?
Yeah, essentially they're the board members. They're the Jewish council, whoever they are. I would say Jewish Federation, but I don't know that's who you want to go to for your halachic guidance. But without this, so he's qualifying Maran and saying what Maran says might be true, but I'm saying only if he has a good enough reason. You can't just say, I don't want you to be the Chazan. What's the reason you don't want to be the Chazan? Now, we've mentioned a number of reasons why a person cannot be the Chazan. Maybe their history, maybe their profession, maybe there are things they do wrong, they have all kinds of things, but you don't like his voice, all kinds of reasons, but it has to be a good reason. It can't be, I don't like his hair. That can't be.
The court.
ואם הוא שונאו, יכול למחות בו קודם שהסכים עליו. Okay, this is the next sentence interesting. ומישהו שונא לשליח ציבור. And somebody who hates the chazan, לא יעלה לספר תורה כשקורא התוכחה. You should not take the aliyah to the Torah when he's reading the curses. Why? Maybe he's going to curse him. I want to make sure he's not reading them about the guy who's standing right next to him. So, here, I'm skipping because we already did. What about mamzer? We did all of that. Now I'm on page 111. We say a shaliach tzibur has to be me'utze l'kahal. Has to be somebody the community wants. Im rov ha'kahal, if most of the community chafetzim b'minui shaliach tzibur, they're chafetz, they desire a certain shaliach tzibur. U'miutam enam maskimim, but a minority of them, they don't want this person to be the chavan. Yicholim hamiut na'akev ba'ad harov. The minority of the community can hold back the majority. So usually you go by majority rules. But here it's important that the shaliach tzibur should be somebody that everybody wants to be the shaliach tzibur. The problem, though, is when you say majority and minority, who are you counting? Who counts? We're going to see it in a second. Look to the next page. V'rabotenu ha-poskim. And our rabbis, the poskim. I told you there was a connection, though, to Rabbi Gershom Mendes Seixas. Hear the connection? When it comes to appointing a Talmid Chacham, the minority dictates who will be the Talmid Chacham, even against the majority. And there was a rabbi, his name was Rabbi Eliyahu Poisek. His book is called Mor ve'Ohanot, if I'm not mistaken, Shalu Tshuvot. He writes that in his opinion, appointing a rabbi is a greater mitzvah than Pidyon Shavuim, than freeing captives. Even though freeing captives is the greatest mitzvah, tell me why appointing a rabbi would be better. Why is it even comparable? Jacob.
He's guiding lost souls.
Two Jacobs. Okay. How do you know if it's bad unless someone tell you? Okay. Because at the end of the day, everybody is a captive unless they have a Talmid Chacham who's guiding them. You know, you see this in some communities that don't have rabbis. It's very rare in America, by the way. It's more common today than it used to be, just because there's a shortage of rabbis being hired across all American denominations. There's an article from Shira Telushkin. She's the daughter of Rabbi Joseph Telushkin. She has an article about the crisis of hiring rabbis in America right now. But at the end of the day, you go to Israel, for example. It's very common. In Israel, there are dozens of Beit Knesset where they're just like Papa. They have a Beit Knesset here, Beit Knesset there. There's no rabbi. There's no Talmid Chacham. There's no. Now, in the olden days, there were Talmidei Chachamim that were just regular people. I told you, it doesn't have to be a rabbi with papers. It has to be somebody who's Talmid Chacham, who's guiding the community. But nowadays, you can sometimes find a minyan, Baruch, you would never know. You never prayed in such a minyan, where the only reason they come together is to drink arak, or to eat chamin during Torah reading, or to break beer bottles and stab each other with them, or whatever else might happen in such a Beit Knesset. And so it's very important that such a Beit Knesset should have a Talmid Chacham who guides them. Because what is going to happen to a community that does not have a Talmid Chacham to guide them? רבותינו הפוסקים כתבו כמה חילוקי דינים בעניינים אלו של מינוי שליח ציבור. הם מתי יכולים היחיד למחות כנגד המינוי, והם מתי יכולים הרוב לכפות דעתם על המיעוט. The poskim have all kinds of details. When the majority, when the minority, what are the reasons, what are not the reasons. The truth is that the vast majority of literature that I found on the subject, not all, the vast majority of it is Ashkenazi. My feeling is that there was a lot more going on in the rabbinate there than was going on by the Sephardim, in terms of politics, in terms of corruption, in terms of all kinds of things. I have what to say there, but it doesn't matter. It's not relevant. Today, it's relevant everywhere. On the next page, וכתבו כמה אחרונים, and some of the אחרונים write, שבזמן הזה, that nowadays, יש ללכת אחר רוב משלמי המס בקהילה. You have to go by the majority of tax-paying members in the community, meaning members, actual members of the Kehillat. American Jews don't like this so much. I said this a few Shabbatot ago, and somebody got offended. Not anybody here. Somebody who left, because I said, my Beit Knesset, this one here, was opened for people who don't have anywhere else to pray. If you have other places to pray, this Beit Knesset was not made for you. We made it because we have nowhere else to go. So we have this place. This is our place. There are some people, they like, they like yo-yos. They're here, one day, there. Wherever there's a free kiddush, that's where they show up. But then who can decide in the Kehillat? The people that are members of the Kehillat. The ones that are financially invested in the Kehillat are the ones who should have a say over what happens in the Kehillat. But it should be normal to you that that's the case, but it's not the case. There are places where there are people who hold the Kehillat financially, and other people who don't do anything, but they think that they get to decide all the things that happen in the Beit Knesset. This happens in more places than you might imagine. There are worse situations. There are some kehillot where the rabbis cater to the people that are not members of the kehillah. So my whole childhood, I grew up in a Beit Knesset, Shabbat, 40, 50, 60 people, I don't know how many people came on Shabbat. And then came high holidays, they would put out 300 chairs, 350 chairs, a lot of chairs. And then the members of the Beit Knesset, by the time you'd come to Tefillah, they had you sit in the back somewhere. But I'm a member. I'm here the whole year. These families are here the whole year. Why don't you give them aliyot? Why don't you call them to the Torah? Why are they in the back of the room? Because you have certain kehillot that value the guests more than they value the actual people. Is this a normal human nature, by the way? Of course. Human nature is you like whatever is new. Whatever is most sparkly is what you like most. Rachel once took my daughters to recycle things. Even by their wedding, I'm going to tell them the story. Rachel took my daughters to recycle cans, bottles, whatever it was, and the money at the end, I don't remember the amount of money. $18? And like, it was like 4 pennies because they were all gold, right? Yeah, they were pennies. And one of my brand new shiny pennies. And my daughter, one of them, she just wanted the shiny pennies. That's all the shiny pennies, what she wanted. Then she gave the $18 to her sister. Why? Because everything that sparkles, we say not all that glitters is gold, but for some people, all that glitters is gold. It's why Chachamim made a halacha, tadir, v'she'eno tadir kodem, that the thing that is more commonly occurring, and that which is less commonly occurring, you give favoritism to the one that is more commonly occurring. Who should you respect more? Your wife or the guest that is coming to your house? For sure your wife, but most people have an inclination to respect the guest more. Why? Because they're new. They're only here for one weekend. They're exciting. That's the wrong way of thinking. The correct way of thinking is you first say Shabbat Shalom, and then you say Chodesh Tov. You first say Shabbat Shalom, and then you say Chag Sameach. Why? Because Shabbat is with you all the time. That's always more important. It feels more exciting when Shabbat falls out on Sukkot, but really, Shabbat is more exciting than Sukkot. We get it all the time. ויש אומרים שבזמן הזה נהגו ללכת אחר הרוב בוועד הקהילה. Some say that nowadays the custom is to go with the majority of the elected officials of the kehillah. So it's not that you go around the room and you ask everybody in the room, but the people in the room have already elected some people to run the kehillah for them. They don't want to get asked for every question in the kehillah. So then you go by the majority of the representatives of the people in the kehillah. Yeah, a board. Yeah, it would be a board, but a good board, not a bad board. Like an honest board. And here it's something important. In the olden days, this is much more relevant. Rabbi Chaim David Halevy has an essay about democracy in halakha. And you see examples of democracy, especially in Eastern Europe. People voting on things. But you'll notice that the people who voted were only the tax-paying members of the Kehillah. An example, Maran writes in the laws of Nisan that in the month of Nisan, every Jewish community gives out tzedakah, ma'ot chitin, money for people to buy matzot and the things they need for Pesach. But who gets the money? I mean, who deserves the money? How long do you have to live in a city before you are eligible to collect ma'ot chitin? What if you're just here for the holiday and you're poor? Yes, but can you take away a percentage of someone else's money who lives here? And so there are all kinds of halachot, how long you have to live there. But the next one is who decides who gets to give away that money. So Rabbi Chaim David Halevy shows that in Ashkenaz the protocol was, unless you are a donating member of the community, you don't make a decision who received tzedakah. It would be a conflict of interest if the people receiving the tzedakah would be voting how much money they should get. And this is something that I think today would be very difficult to implement in our current reality, but it's something that you see the problems of, that people that don't have what to lose, they only have what to gain, make decisions for those who have what to lose with their money, with their taxes, I'm not here to American politics right now, but it's something that I don't have an answer for it, but it's a problem. So, ויש אומרים, some say שבזמן הזה שכל הקהל בקיאים להתפלל כראוי, that everybody today knows how to pray properly, ואין השליח ציבור מוציאה מדי חובת מצוות תפילה, and the Chazan is not really praying for you. The days of nobody knows how to read Hebrew, and the Chazan is praying out loud everything for you, are behind us for the most part. And hayachid, you'll tell me there's still people in the kehillah that don't know how to read. Are there communities where people still know how to read Hebrew? Yeah, of course. The problem is when you go to those communities, the ones who don't know how to read Hebrew, they're not listening to the Chazan either. They're talking to the guy next. So, anyways, he's not doing the mitzvah for them. I'm not talking about this.
Sometimes they're the Chazan as well.
One day you're gonna meet Yaakov. You're gonna appreciate it. Sometimes they're the Chazan as well. We're gonna get to that too. Unfortunately, this is something that you find very often. Okay, I'm gonna hold my tongue from saying Lashon Hara. Uvechol inyan. In any case, אין אדם רשאי לעבור לפני התיבה ולהתפלל נגד רצון הקהל. A person should never force themselves to be the chazan against the will of the community. There are some people, they don't know how to read the room. Nobody wants them to pray. But they decided they need to pray. Why do they need to pray? They have an Azkarah for somebody. They don't like the way the other guy prayed. The nosach is I was once in a Beit Knesset in Manhattan, in the Upper West Side. I guess the guy who prayed Shacharit didn't have such a nice voice. And whoever was the assistant rabbi there, he heard me singing from the back of the room, kept asking me if I would. It's like, you know Ashkenazi tunes? Will you lead the Musaf for us? I said, sure, I know how to do an Ashkenazi Musaf. So I went up, and by accident, I said, "Vayatzmach pulkaneh v'karev mishichet." Wow. It's a Nosach Ashkenaz synagogue. It was not a Hasidic synagogue. And they almost like Daniel in the lion's den. It was like at that moment I realized the world was crashing around behind me. And this Chazan, he came, no, I'm going to try to push me from the task. I don't want to be the Chazan here. I don't want to be Chazan. They asked me. I would never put myself in a place. I'm sorry. I said, after Kaddish, I'll step down. No, the rabbi didn't continue. That was a very complicated situation for me to be in. Because maybe the Kahal doesn't want me anymore. I'm a Vayatzmach Pulkaneh guy. Maybe they don't want me. Maybe they don't. By the way, it's very interesting. In all the old Sidurim, the Yemenite ones, the Sephardic ones, they all say Vayatzmach. The Hasidim also, the majority of Klal Yisrael says Vayatzmach Pulkaneh v'Krem Shichet. So maybe the Ashkenazim are missing a sentence and not that we added a sentence. Maybe. I don't know. I'm not here to. It's not the end of the world. What did I pray for? The redemption should happen? That's a big deal, I guess. Politics. Maybe, right. They paid the mortgage already. They don't want to leave. וכל העובר לפני התיבה ביד חזקה ובדרך אלימות וכופה עצמו על הציבור. And anybody who forces himself to be the chazan violently, meaning it's not new that there are violent people that try to force themselves to the teva. אין עונים אחריו amen. The halacha is we don't answer amen after their blessing. We pretend that he's not there. It's transparent. Do I remember if there is a kohen? My life was of that kohen. What are you going to do? He forced himself to the front of the room. No, that was a different kohen. There's two kohanim we're talking about. That was the apples kohanim, and that was the marijuana and cell phones kohanim. That was a different kohen. Not in this kehillah. Baruch Hashem, not in this kehillah. Elchanan, you missed all the exciting things. They all happened before your time. I can't. Yes, I'll be over here.
No, I'm having a hard time. The rabbinate threw apples at the Kohen?
No,
How did he hear?
the kohen threw apples at us.
Oh, I couldn't see the rabbinate.
Okay, the kohen story I could tell. The apple story I could tell. In my old Beit Knesset, we used to give candies to the kids who said Yimloch, the Torah. Yimloch Adonai le'olam. We gave candies. And he came up, and this Kohen was not 100% of a Kohen. I mean, maybe he was 100% Kohen, but he was not 100% human. And in those days, I was renting a Beit Knesset from another Jewish organization. I was on the top floor, and he was their Kohen from downstairs. And he was only their Kohen downstairs because his father paid the rabbi to keep him in the Beit Knesset so he wouldn't come home. That was the arrangement over there. So this Kohen, when he heard that we do Birkat Kohanim every Shabbat, he got excited. We started coming upstairs and doing Birkat Kohanim. He once ran for president. This guy was an unusual character. He's a very unusual guy. No, I don't know. The apples, they voted for him. So he once ran for president. It's okay. His only title was the crazy Kohen from downstairs. That was his title, okay? And he decided that the candies we were giving the children, that sugar is cocaine. Listen, I understand that not everybody wants their kids to have sugar. I understand that there are healthier things in the world to eat than sugar. But the one candy we gave the kids for Shabbat, But at those times, Zev, I think you were still buying the lollipops then. They were organic lollipops in the first place. I don't even think we were. Yeah, Zev was. Oh, that was after that. Okay, it was something. And so at the end of the day, the guy decided he screamed, "You're giving crack cocaine to the kids. You guys are a CPS." I was screaming as well. Okay, and it was a whole commotion. I asked him to leave the Beit HaKnesset. He didn't leave, and then he forced himself to the Duchan to be the Kohen, and then he came back with a bag of oranges and apples. And he started throwing them at the kids. Like, here, take an orange. Take it. Like the way you throw lollipops at the bar mitzvah, he was throwing apples and oranges at everybody. And those were the days. They have days like that. They're very.
They call them fruit rolls in public school. You throw fruit at the teacher.
There are very few times in my life I've asked a person to leave the Beit HaKnesset. That was one of them. He didn't leave. He forced himself to be the Kohen. Now, what are we going to do? He did the whole. Look at.
No, I think your father got up and he did what do they call it,
the half Kiddushah, so there wouldn't be a repetition. You remember, bro? I block out the trauma in my mind.
No, he didn't know how not to make friends with influence people.
You mentioned the story about how you said Yishmach Ufene in Ashkenazi, right?
Yeah.
I had a similar situation happen to me where I was in the Aguda Israel and I said a Kaddish and I accidentally, I said the version that I know, that I'm familiar with, that's on my lips. And ironically, the one Sephardi guy in the Ashkenazi minyan came to tell me, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. This is not that type of minyan over here.
Listen, I'm going to tell you one thing. In every Ashkenazi minyan you go to, there's one Sephardi guy saying Kaddish, screaming Revach v'Atzalam when the Ashkenazim get lost. They don't know what to happen when that sentence happens. And I think in general, it's okay to go to an Ashkenazi, but I can say Ashkenazi Kaddish. By me was mamash peletat peh. Like I was leading the tefillah. You have to understand, my whole life when I prayed Ashkenazi, I was leading Ashkenazi services at Chabad. So even my Ashkenazi tune, it was in a nosach that had. It's not like I was forcing my thing there, but there's what to be said, especially in communities that are very sensitive. So I would say, when I was in Baltimore, for example, if you would sit down or stand up at the wrong time, the whole room noticed that you were sitting or standing. It was like a very big offense. If you I remember they stood up for Kehillat Torah, they sat down. If you would sit down, the whole Beit HaKnesset noticed. I think in our Beit HaKnesset, most normal Beit HaKnesset in the world, there are some people who sit, some people who stand. There are some Sfaradim, some Ashkenazim, some Hasidim, some not religious people, they're all doing their thing. I think most of us don't have that kind of sensitivity that hearing a word that is different throws us off. I once had a story in my old Beit HaKnesset. I'm telling a story. In my old Beit HaKnesset, one of my nephews came to visit me. My wife's nephew. So it's my brother-in-law's son. He's a Chassid, Karlin Chassid. And he came to pray with us Friday night in the Beit HaKnesset. And he was the guy, he didn't know which direction to hold the Siddur. He had never in his life seen a Sephardic Siddur in his life. And he didn't understand not the accent, not the pronunciation, nothing, not anything. And then that night he came over and asked me, is it okay with you if I go pray with the Chabad minyan? I said, of course, go pray. I don't care. You pray wherever you want. And halfway through Musaf, I see him back in my Beit HaKnesset. I said, what happened? He said, I don't understand what they're saying either. He said his whole life, he was 28 or 29, he'd married with children. He said his whole life, he never prayed in a Beit HaKnesset that was not a Karlin Beit HaKnesset. He didn't once, he didn't catch a minyan from Mincha somewhere that was different than how he was raised. So he said if he doesn't understand them, he said, I'll pray with whoever I like. I know you, I want to stay with you. So if I'm not understanding what's happening anyways, then I'll do that. For me, it's very hard that in the year 2025, there are Jewish people you've never been to a Sephardic, Ashkenazi, Yemenite, Hasidic, you've never gone around somewhere before? My grandfather was born in Yemen, and he could pray in a Hasidic Beit HaKnesset. Okay. My grandfather could pray with a Hasidic accent in a Hasidic Beit HaKnesset. He was born in Yemen. He spoke Yiddish. Why? He figured his neighbors speak Yiddish. Got time to learn Yiddish. There are some people, they never want to experience anything else. I feel sad for them, but at the end of the day, you're going to have situations where you might end up marrying somebody, Ashkenazi or Sephardic or Yemenite. It happens. It happens more often than you think.
Leave that content for Tisha B'Av.
Rabbi Gershom Mendes Seixas. He was the Sephardic rabbi of America, and he was married to Elkanah. That's what I'm saying. It happens everywhere to everyone, and to think that it couldn't happen is very unusual. People don't prepare themselves. The one thing in Israel, I think in Israel, for the most part, unless you live in a ghetto, and there are some Jews in there who live in a ghetto, but for the most part, Israeli Jews don't. They've heard it all. You go to high school, you go to the army, you go to the Beit Knesset in your corner. You hear enough different things that Owen's grandfather really should live and be well. Should ever flash them on his mouth. He needs to flash them out. But he was famous reading the Torah. In his he read Torah. When he came here, he read the Torah. He was born in Baghdad. He can read the Torah in Ashkenazi because he goes his whole life to Bnei Akiva Beit Knesset in Israel. He reads for them, and they prefer that he reads for them than any of it because he reads for them like them better than them. That's a special thing. Why should it not be like that? That everybody can. So I took my tangent. Let me finish this save before we end the shiur. I mentioned to you already about going up to the Torah. Somebody who knows the Chazan hates him. Why might he hate him? What's a good example? He threw oranges and apples at him.
He owes people money.
Well, let's say he owes people money. Or he's hurt him in business before. There's a reason why in the community there's tension between two people. It happens. Since the beginning of Kehillat HaShamayim, I've asked everybody, please, 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 please don't do business with each other. Please. My father has a rule. You should only do business with somebody you feel comfortable suing. If you can't sue them, don't work with them. Because it's complicated. Afterwards, you get the whole community gets involved, the families get involved. So sometimes people help each other. I'm not sticking my nose. If you have good midot and you can work it out, fine. But it's a good suguna. The Rabbanit always says, the only thing you should do with your family is eat pizza with them. Everything else, do business with other people. Start suing your brothers and your sisters and your parents. How many times I take my kids to the barber. They have always Judge Judy playing in the barber shop. I don't know if Judge Judy's still a judge. I don't even know what's going on. But every time, what is it? A mother suing her daughter, a son suing his father. Come on. And they always, the one thing Chokhmah I can tell you, I don't know anything about Judge Judy. I know she's Jewish. And I think it's everything I don't know. One word of Chokhmah. She said, why didn't you write a contract? She said, because they're family, and I trusted them. She said, because their family is the reason you should have written a contract. If they weren't family, you don't care to take them to court. You can fight with them all you want. But because they're your family, you should have had everything written down. It's the people's relationships you want to preserve that you should write contracts with. Not the ones that you don't. If they're dispensable to you, then who cares about the contract? So you have some reason like that in the Kehillah that people are fighting with each other. צריך לבקש שלא יזמינו לעלות התורה בפרשת תוכחה, מפני שיש לחוש שמא יכוון השליח ציבור עליו בדברי התוכחה ויבוא לידי סכנה. Because you don't want him to be cursing you during the parashiot where they read the curses of the Torah. And ask, please don't call me up to the Torah when he's reading because I don't want him to curse me. Umikol makom. Now this may be superstitious. I don't know that I actually believe in this, but he's writing here something interesting. It's for the second half that I wanted to read you. ומכל מקום, nonetheless, אם כבר קראוהו בשמו לעלות התורה בפרשת תוכחה, לא יסרב, יעלה לתורה. If they already called you up by your name, then you should go to the Torah. Remember, I mentioned you, Chacham Ovadia Yosef gave a shiur where if someone calls up, instead of calling up Ben Devorah, I said call up Devorah Bat Meir. Then she must take the aliyah. Chacham Ovadia, if you don't believe me, Chacham Ovadia has a recording where I saved it in I'm like a hard drive, because I knew somebody will tell me he never said it. Why? There's a few reasons. You should never turn down a mitzvah, but one, it's a sakana. They say, a rabbi say that a person who's called to the Torah doesn't go, and bad things happen there. So if you're afraid of the superstition of being called up to the curses, you should be more afraid to turn down an aliyah to the Torah. There are many reasons, but one of the reasons given for why Sephardim don't call people up to the Torah by name has to do with this. Because sometimes you call up a person to the Torah. Watch this. You call a person and they don't want to go to the Torah. On our Shabbaton, there was someone who insisted on being called up by his name, and I tried to get out of it, but he insisted. And they even want a tune. Yeah, okay, it happens. Some people that we're used to. Sometimes you call up the wrong person. Two brothers together. Some reason. Sometimes you call up a person, you realize they're still praying Amidah. Now what do? So better not to call, just say Shalishi. It turns out that the guy you thought was going to Shalishi doesn't come, so you give somebody a Shalishi, nobody knows. And you use the name by the Mishaberach. If I may, just one last note. I'll end the shiur here. I'll do the next halachot next week about Avelim in a good way. People who say Kaddish in their life. There's a famous debate regarding Chazarat Hashatz, the repetition of the Amidah. Already in the days of the Rambam, Rabbeinu Rambam has letters which he said that in his community they don't do the repetition of the Amidah. Why not to do the let's start. Why do we repeat the Amidah out loud? For the people who don't know how to read, so we say the Amidah for them, yeah. People that know they were in books. So now you're able to say the word, the Chazan knows word for word out loud. And you listen and answer Amen. So the people who were repeating the Amidah were repeating it for people who needed to have the Amidah said for them. Nowadays, how many people don't have a book or can't read the English or the Hebrew inside of the book? Nobody. Nobody. So who's the Chazan repeating the Amidah for? For nobody. How do you know he's repeating it for nobody? Nobody's listening. People, the civilized people are reading a book, newspapers, whatever they're reading. The uncivilized people are talking. They're talking. They're doing things. They're rearranging the furniture, whatever they do. Yeah? Yeah, the person who's repeating is standing as if he's the Chazan. Yeah. Yeah, that person is everything the Chazan does, they're doing. Yeah, it's a good question. We don't even see anyone really do that anymore. Yeah, that everyone's sitting down. Right, that's Ashkenazim. They stand for Chazarat Hashatz. Real Ashkenazim. I don't know. When I say Ashkenazim, but here in San Diego, they don't. I don't know what happens in San Diego. When I say Ashkenazim, I mean real Ashkenazim. But why? Because that's part of what they do. Now, what happens to a community that everyone's talking and everyone's... So then I really realize, if the Shaliach Tzibur is saying brachot and nobody's even answering Amen, he ends up saying brachot avatala. And there already became a minhag in many places not to say Chazarat Hashatz. So, it's like a blind beetle over here.
Yeah.
You see him? So,
Chacham David Yosef says to do the what do you call it? The reading of the Kaddish Alan, and then from after
a half, what they call a half kedusha, yeah. So in our kehillat we do it a lot, and sometimes it throws people off. Now in the early days, I had a rule in the kehillat that when we have no guests, we do a full Chazarat Hashatz. When we have guests, we do half. And still, there are times you see I push for a whole kedusha, but lately, anyways, we started a little later than we should, and it ends up going only on the holidays we do a full repetition. And when they're kohanim, so when they're kohanim, it gets complicated. You can do still a half kedusha with kohanim, but just everyone gets confused. You have to go quiet and then go loud again. So when they're kohanim, we say full kedusha. In our community, we're not. We do a half. And what? Yeah, Ashkenazim have a name like that for it. And then we have here another problem. In Morocco, there was a big war about the half kedusha, and Rabbi Yosef Masas was famous that he was the one who waged the war. So in Yemen, you already had like the Rambam, many people. When I used to pray with the Baladi community, already Musaf, nobody said never, and like never, ever. And if there were Kohanim, they would do what I said, which they would say quietly and then would raise their voice for Birkat Kohanim. And by the Sephardim, the complication became Kabbalah. Okay, the Arizal writes that today the repetition is more important than it was then, and it has to do with all kinds of Kabbalistic reasons that I'm not getting into. I'm not a Kabbalist. But that today, especially, you have to worry about doing Chazarat Hashatz. And if you don't do it, all kinds of things that are problematic. You ruin all the tzinorot and the pipes and the holiness. And if you're a Kabbalist and you know what he's talking about, run with it. But I'm not. Rabbi Yosef Masas, that in Morocco, fought a war they should not say the whole Kiddusha. And he would go to Batei Knesset, where they did say the whole repetition. He would take notes. In row 3A, he was talking. In row 4B, he was reading a book. In row that he was looking at his wife, lady section. In row, he made a list, and at the end of the tefillah, he would give the list to the rabbi. Rabbi, you were talking in minute 37 and 26 seconds, and he would just give them grades. And said, none of you keep proper decorum during Chazarat Hashatz. I expect for you to stop saying the whole Kiddusha, the whole repetition, the whole Chazarat. And so I think that here you deal with something interesting, which is sometimes the tefillah requires from us to change the way we do things, even just because of the people that are here. And sometimes there are people who are afraid to change things because it's different than the way we used to do things. And this is one of those struggles. When it comes to tefillah, I think the greatest thing in the world is to have Shaliach Tzibur who's a Talmid Chacham. Because then always the decisions that are made are done with Chokhmah. When you go to Tefillah and say, let's skip this part of Tefillah, let's do this, they don't get scared because they understand exactly what you're doing. When you deal with a professional chazan, and all he knows how to do is sing out the songs, but now you're telling him he has to skip a song, he doesn't know what to do. I was once in a Beit Knesset where they said, today the rabbi is not going to speak. It wasn't my Beit Knesset. The rabbi is not going to speak because we're starting Tefillah late and we're saying Shir HaShirim. So in order to say Shir HaShirim, the rabbi is not going to say Derasha. But I was the senior rabbi. Yani I had some authority in the room. I said, here's my recommendation to you. Skip Shir HaShirim and have the rabbi talk. It's more important the rabbi should say Derasha than you should say Shir HaShirim. In fact, skip all of Kabbalat Shabbat. Skip L'Chadodi. Skip all of it and have the rabbi give a Derasha. Between learning Torah and praying all the extra stuff that you added to the Siddur, of course learning Torah is more. The rabbi giving Musar, of course the rabbi has to give Musar. That's a hard part. In looking in the literature here, I was looking in Shtilei Zetim, Yemen today with Prem Hashu. It's a hard concept when you appoint a rabbi, because of course some of the community is not going to like it. Because the job of the rabbi is to tell the community things they don't always like to hear. So you're always going to have people that are not going to like the rabbi. In fact, if you have a rabbi that everybody likes him, then likely he's not doing his job properly. What I mean by like him, I don't mean you should hate him as a person. That's not the point. I'm not hating. The thing is that the rabbi always makes you feel good and comfortable. Don't do anything different. It's likely he's not doing his job and pushing you hard to do mitzvot properly. Musar is a fundamental part of how we study, how we grow, how we become better people. It's the job of the rabbi to give musar. It's also the job of the rabbi to take musar. It's also a complicated thing. It's very hard when you give musar to know, to include yourself in the tochacha. We're all in this together. If there's a problem in the community, then primarily it's my problem, because I'm the rabbi of the community.
And care for the people who you're speaking with. It's not taken in a negative way. It's like, I know he's doing this. It's like a physician who tells you, well, you have like this particular problem, and for the next 3 months you're going to have to do this. It's actually an act of chesed.
Zev, somebody came to me, they went to the doctor, and the doctor said, you're so fat, that's why you have all these problems. Now listen, likely the person has many health issues because they're obese. But you could, if your point is to help them, they said the doctor tells the guy, this thing runs in your family. Says, no, doctor, the problem is that nobody runs in my family. If your goal was to help the person, then you would say it in a way, Divrei Chachamim, benachat nishmaim. If you want your words to be heard, you have to say them in a way that is able to be heard. But Zev, I'm going to push back on that. That is, even if you say things in a way that is easy to be heard and full of love and compassion, there are still people who, when the criticism hits too close to themselves, they don't know how to take it. And it's hard for them. And they end up feeling, wow, that person is picking on me. They're not picking on me, they're picking on everybody in the room. Now, why just you? Why is the whole world revolving around you?
How do people personalize things?
Yes, that's true. So that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, we all have it. If somebody spoke about us, we'd all feel it personally. And I think that's the point. It's a relationship between a rabbi and a student. If there are things that I told you that Hara Peretz gave me musar about over my life, you would be royally offended if I would tell you some of the things he told me. But that's because I was in a completely different space with him. That's what I wanted from him. I needed somebody who could say to my face that thing in that place in that way. He wouldn't say it to you because you're not a student. You're not picking on people. I think that this is something important, that when there's a relationship, then all things should be able to go along. Whenever you see a relationship between a Talmid Chacham and a community, between teachers and students, parents and children, then a lot of things go a long way. A rabbi say, Tamid tiyeh semol docha v'yamin mekarevet. You should always push away with your left hand and bring people close with your right hand. Mori harav, Avinon Baruch, come here. Mori harav would never give us musar unless he was like this. Or like this. Tishma adon nichbad. Yeah, you always tell us, listen to me. What? Just so you should feel. Now, I know today already we don't touch anybody in the whole, I got it. Yeah? But in our reality, which was, I want you to know when I'm criticizing you that I don't hate you. I'm doing something to show you that I love you, and I'm telling you this from a place of I love you. Most people, healthy people, can handle that. Not everybody's healthy. Not everybody's able to. That's already work for them. They also have musar they have to take one day at a time. Thank you for learning with me tonight.